Hey guys, welcome back to Andy's Dinosaur Reviews. As you can see, we've got another of those newer battle damage figures, but, well, I say newer, but at the same time, they're not really too new. They've been out for a few months now, but they're just such a hard figure to find. I really had quite the hard time trying to find this figure. It took me a while, just like the battle damage Velociraptor. It took me a little bit of time to try to locate one. I actually had purchased this guy from Walmart.com a little while back, and it ended up getting canceled, because the stock, as far as Walmart.com goes, has been so hit or miss with this figure. I think this one has come into stock a little more so than the Battle Damage Velociraptor, but it is pretty much just as elusive as the Raptor is as far as finding it, so it took me a while, but I was finally able to locate one. One thing to note, however, about this figure is it's actually a completely different color than it should have been. As far as the promotional images go, you can see here that this is what it actually originally looked like, and it does not at all appear that way on the final release. I don't know why, because I actually really like the original color scheme. I thought it was very cool and something different that we hadn't previously got from the Jurassic World toy line. However, they, I guess at the last minute, decided to change their minds and go with the Jurassic World paint scheme in the final decision, but regardless, it does still look really quite cool. Just like the Battle Damage Raptor, however, the packaging is really thin and flimsy. It's only these two figures so far that I've found that has that issue. I don't know why they decided to do that, but they did. And once again, the back shows you some Battle Damage figures down there on the left bottom side, and shockingly, it actually shows you the Battle Damage Velociraptor there in the corner, so hopefully that means that this figure will become more abundant along with the Battle Damage Raptor. And then of course you see a picture up here of the actual Pteranodon and its battle damage feature. So, without further ado, let's break it out of its chains. So there you go. The Pteranodon is now loose and flying about, and overall it looks really quite cool so far. So, with it being so low to the ground, there's not too much to really look at if I just set it here. So let's go ahead and get a closer look. Now, I believe the overall sculpt is exactly the same as the previous Pteranodons that we had gotten as far as the smaller ones go, but there are a few little additions as far as it being a battle damage version. But taking a look up here at the head, you can see the head sculpt is really quite nice. However, the eye paint here is applied quite sloppily. It's not quite in the spot that it should be. It's not too far off, however, and if you look at it from back here, you really can't notice that it's sloppy because the dark green around the eye, and it kind of is just a dark general area. It's harder to notice that the eye is not exactly in place. The other eye on the other side is really quite perfect. You can see that it's painted really nicely, but this side is just off a little bit. Again, we have reviewed the sculpt of this previously, so we don't really have to go over the sculpt too much, just basically the new additions. You can see that the inside of the mouth is a very nice pinkish color with a beautiful gloss. Looks fairly realistic, and you can see again that they do have teeth included, even though Pteranodon did not in fact have teeth. Articulation of the jaw is really super easy to move, very similar to the Velociraptor version. I'm not sure why these other battle damage figures have such easily movable articulated jaws, but they really do, and I have no idea why, but it's not a bad thing. Again, as I mentioned, the entire head sculpt is really quite the same and looks just like the Rorovore, but in smaller form. Then as we move back onto the body, you can get an idea of the differences. This wing honestly looks probably exactly the same as the other smaller Pteranodon figures did. However, on this side, you can see that there is actually a tear right there in the wing, and there's a few slits down here on the bottom part of the wing to really show off the battle damage effect, and I think that is awesome. I really love that, and it's cool to have something like this in my collection just because it's so different from the other ones, but at the same time so similar. Of course, there is the battle damage feature, which we push over, pops open to look at the gore on the inside of the Pteranodon. Works very nicely, very smooth, just like all of the other battle damage figures. And this one actually has legs that are articulated here, so you can move the legs. They do seem to move together. I can't really tell. It kind of looks like maybe you can move them individually, but for the most part, they do go together. And the entire underside is basically just all one color. There's no difference in coloration at all anywhere, but you can get an idea here of the battle damage again on the wing, showing you some slits there looks very, very cool. And there is the Jurassic Facts code for anyone interested in adding this to your collection. It is still a really, really cool Pteranodon, and yet another very nice addition to the Pterosaur collection from Mattel. Again, as far as articulation really goes, the neck here is on a swivel. It can also go up and down, left and right, but not too far. The mouth, as I mentioned, is articulated, works really well. There is, of course, the articulation of the battle damage. The wings can flap, so they work quite well. They can go pretty far down. And they can also swivel as well. And then, of course, the legs themselves are also articulated. So there is a decent bit of articulation, honestly, with this Pteranodon, and I really quite like it. As far as a size, if we go from the feet to the beak, you're looking at about 5 inches or about 13 centimeters. And if we go from the wingspan here, you're looking at about 9 inches or about 23 centimeters. It's definitely much smaller than the Roarivore Pteranodon, and to prove that point, there is the new battle damage with the original Roarivore, and the Roarivore, as you can see, just absolutely dwarfs it. You can see that the Roarivore is much, much larger, and they actually look kind of similar because the Roarivore has the button here on the back to push to make the wings flap, whereas this one button is for the battle damage. It is cool to see these two. They look very cool together. It's cool to see them together and see that they do look very similar, but yet at the same time much different in size. And it is nice also to see that Mattel has recently updated the sculpt of this by including articulation in the legs, whereas the Roarivore does not have that kind of articulation. But this should give you a pretty good idea, if you own the Roarivore, of the size of the smaller battle damaged version. And our normal friend, the Papa Rex, here showing you again the size of the Pteranodon next to him. They are of course not to scale at all with each other, but this should be a pretty good idea of what the size of this Pteranodon is. It's a fairly small figure, but not super small. So this Pteranodon is yet another absolutely awesome release by Mattel. It's not my favorite paint scheme, as I'm pretty partial to the Jurassic Park 3 paint scheme on Pteranodons, but I guess this is a Fallen Kingdom figure, so it makes sense to have it in the paint scheme of Jurassic World. And overall, I think the addition of the slit in the wing is such a very cool, very subtle touch. I really love that. I love the entire area in this spot on the wing with the battle damage. I think the battle damage feature on the back is really quite cool as well. The paint applied to this is pretty darn nice. It's very natural looking. The eye being in the wrong spot is the only slight bit of sloppiness that I see, but it's not that big of a deal because you can really barely quite notice it, since that's such a dark area and it kind of has an indent on the head that you don't see the eye the eye socket too well. So overall, I don't really mind that too much. And this figure is really nicely sculpted. The sculpt on this Pteranodon is beautiful, really reminds me of the actual Jurassic Park 3 Pteranodons. So without question, this is another very, very cool Fallen Kingdom, or Mattel in general, release for the Jurassic World toy line. If you do want to buy this guy, again, he's going to be a little tough to find. As far as finding it in stores, I've only seen it one time, and it was just a few days ago, so I don't know if, again, that's a sign that they're going to start becoming more abundant, and hopefully everyone will have a chance to find them, or if it's just going to be that elusive figure that is really hard to find. Either way, just keep checking your local Walmart, and hopefully you'll run into it at some point. And happy hunting, and good luck trying to find one. Please like, comment, and subscribe, and I will see you in the next review. Thanks for watching.